But if the ministry of death, written and engraved on stones, was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which glory was passing away, how will the ministry of the Spirit not be more glorious? Remember what Moses was asking to see of God? Glory. Show me your glory. Don't forget that. Verse 9, for if the ministry of condemnation had glory, the ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. For even what was made glorious had no glory in this respect, because of the glory that excels. For if what is passing away was glorious, what remains is much more glorious. Glory kind of means shining. And when something is really shining bright, 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 you don't even notice something that might be kind of shining. For example, sometimes the moon's up in the sky at the same time as the sun is. But you don't recognize it as quickly because there's a very glorious sun there shining. But if the sun is not up in the sky and the moon is up, well, then you'll recognize it. It doesn't shine as much because it doesn't have to be compared with the greater glory. But when they're both there, one far outshines the other. But in verse 12 he says this, therefore, since we have such hope, we use great boldness of speech. Unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. But their minds were blinded. For until this day, the same veil remains unlifted in the reading of the Old Testament, because the veil is taken away in Christ. But even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on their heart. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of God. So he's making this comparison in contrast. That what was going on in Moses was glorious. And the law was glorious. And that covenant was glorious. And the things that God did with the nation of Israel was glorious. But it's still not the fullness of what God is about or who He is. It really is only His back. And it's not His face. Now the law describes God. But in describing God, sometimes it's not always easy to figure out what a description is. Let me give you an example. Who in this congregation is a mechanic? I hope your cars don't break down. What's your name again?
Kevin.
Kevin, that's right, I remember. Now we know each other. We know each other's names. Kevin is a mechanic. At least he's fooled his girlfriend into thinking that. Now let's say, Kevin, have you ever worked on really old cars?
Yes.
You know what a carburetor is?
Yes.
I don't. Let's say that I have an old car and I'm trying to rebuild the carburetor. And I call Kevin on the phone. He's down here in Yuba City or wherever he lives. And I'm up in Chester. And I say, I'm at my workbench right now. I got you on the phone. And I just want you to describe to me how to rebuild a carburetor. And he says, hey, okay, here we go. And maybe the first thing he says is, well, you got this kit, this rebuilding kit, right? And I say, what? Well, then I come back from the store with that. And then he says, okay, let's say if you find the float. And I say, the float, is it this thingamajig or this doohickey? And he goes, well, I don't know. What's it look like? And I said, well, it kind of looks like a thingamajig. And he goes, no, I think it's the doohickey. And so we start talking about how to put this carburetor together on the phone, right? And after we keep going on this for a while, pretty soon I say, Kevin, there's red fluid leaking out of this thing, this carburetor of mine. And he goes, oh, well, that's because it's not your carburetor, it's your power steering thing, you know. And so we got some problems here. So Kevin says, you know what? Instead of trying to just explain this to you, I'm going to hang up now and I'm going to drive up there and I'm not just going to explain how to rebuild a carburetor. I'm going to demonstrate it. You suppose that would be a little bit easier? So he drives all the way up and then we're sitting there at the bench together and then he demonstrates to me what it is to rebuild the carburetor. And then I'll understand. Go over to John, the 1st chapter, and let me show you something here. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And He was in the beginning with God. And all things that were made through Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. They didn't know how to rebuild that carburetor. What are you saying to me on the phone? Where does the doohickey go? Where's the thingamajig go? They did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light which gives light to every man coming into this world. He was in the world, and the world was made through Him, and the world did not know Him. He came to His own, and His own did not receive Him. But as many as received Him, to them He gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in His name. Hold on to that. His name. Because when we go back over here to Exodus 34, God is going to say, I'm going to tell you my name, Moses. Who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelled among us, and we beheld His glory. As I'm walking around up here, it's creaking a lot. At 12, you guys got a little button you hit, and it's just a little door, and off I go. Can you hear that? It's making me nervous. So we beheld in Him His glory. Remember what Moses asked? Show me your glory. The glory is the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of Him and cried out, saying, This was He of whom I said, He who comes after me is preferred before me, for He was before me. And of His fullness we have all received, grace for grace. For the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten Son who is in the bosom of the Father, He has declared Him. Jesus Christ comes upon this earth and His name is Emmanuel, God with us. He's not the law. He fulfills the law, right? He fulfills the law. And what do we mean by that? Except He says, everything that you read about the law, I have done. And as we start looking at this guy, everything that the law was describing, we start seeing Him performing, but it's no longer just a description of it, it's a demonstration of it. And we behold in Him the glory is the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Sure, the law came through Moses, but now we finally see it made into flesh in Jesus Christ. Go back over to Exodus 34. Let me show you what we already got up here on the board. This. In verse 4 of Exodus 34, he says, So he cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones. Then Moses rose early in the morning, went up on Mount Sinai, and the Lord had commanded him, and he took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. Now the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. Let me connect it for you. Moses said, God, we're friends. You know me by name, right? Well, I want to know you better. Show me your glory. God says, well, I can give you a part of it. I can just give you my back right now. By the way, go get those 2 tablets of stones and quit breaking them. And I'll write on them the things that were written on them before. Okay? So I'm going to now pass before you, and I'm going to declare my name. Now remember this. Names back then meant something. Okay? Today, names don't really mean anything, do they? Most of the time, somebody has a name, Danny. Well, what does that mean? Now, I know what you're thinking, but it doesn't mean that. My name actually means something. My heritage is from Denmark. So my family named me Dane. There's actually a meaning to it. And somebody said to me one time, well, it was a good thing you weren't Flemish. Took them a while to think about that. You see that? Oh, okay, I got you. But most of the time you meet people today and their names don't mean anything. But back then, names were an identification of somebody. We kind of have the tradition when we watch Westerns now, the American Indians in this area, in all areas, sometimes they would get a different name after they got to a certain age that would describe something about their character or something that they had done. We kind of don't have that tradition anymore, but back then names really did identify somebody. It showed who they were. So if I was named today in that kind of tradition, I'd have a name like Spitz when he talks or something. It would describe who I was or something about me. Okay? And that's what's going on with God. When He says, I'm going to declare my name, He's just not saying, hi, I'm Fred. He's going to really show him who He is. And as He goes on to say this, He first comes down in a cloud, and that's important. And I'll tell you why. When we talk about the image of God, many times people want to put some kind of physical image on it. Like the Frank and Ernest cartoon. Or even ascribing some kind of power and energy to an image of a cross. They want something kind of they can touch or see or feel. And it was the same struggle that they were going on with back then. So when God was making His covenant with them, He said, by the way, do not make an image unto me. Because the minute you start making an image unto me, you don't know me. You don't understand me. And they said, right, God, we got you. And then they made a golden cow. What an image. You ever think about that? Let's say you came to my office one day and I had some pictures on my desk. And you say, you got a picture of a cow here and 4 monkeys. What's that? And I say, well, this is the image of my wife and children. Do you think my wife would like me to represent her with that kind of image? There's no answer. You guys have no idea, do you? Let me just be real clear. No. She wouldn't. Now, I got to be honest with you. Liam would probably like the image of a monkey a little bit. But the others, no. Can you imagine trying to represent God, the creator of all, with a cow? So He comes down in a cloud, because how do you make an image into a cloud? Let's see, here's a guy with a piece of wood. Okay, carve us a cloud. It's kind of nebulous. It's like the wind, isn't it? Somebody says, draw me a picture of the wind. And what do we draw? We draw like a tree going like this. We draw the effects of the wind, but you're not drawing the wind. Because the wind doesn't have a physical image, does it? Isn't that what Jesus kind of says the Spirit's like? It's like the wind.